Let us rejoice and be glad in it. It is a wonderful pleasure to see everybody here today. Great to have the visitors with us that we have. And hope that you will find our worship services pleasing and that you'll come back. Friday morning, get in my truck, drive out of town. We have a new billboard, a little small electric billboard, and on it it's got all these beautiful flowers. Something about welcome spring or spring's here or whatever, and you look down and there's 4 inches of snow. And it's like, oh, it's a cool sign. Could not believe it when I opened the door and there was snow. And it's like, oh, I thought we were over this. Ready for spring to spring. We are continuing our study this morning on our 12-part series based on these daily scripture readings that I have found on the internet. A lot of people already picked them up last week, but if you have not picked up one for this month, they're back there on that table under the bulletin board, and go ahead and pick them up for this month. We are going to be looking at forgiveness. And I know this isn't a subject that we need to look at. It's not a subject that we need to study because we all understand forgiveness, don't we? We don't have a problem with forgiveness, do we? We forgive. That's the reason we're going to take a look at it, just to make sure that we understand what forgiveness is. Make sure that we're doing it properly, okay? And if you remember in our study, we looked at new beginnings in January. February, we looked at love. Last month, we looked at finding rest, peace, and comfort in God. And so for the next 4 weeks, Lord willing, we're going to look at forgiveness and what that means. Now, there are 4 directions, I think, that forgiveness can take, and for each and every one of us. The first is going to be what I consider to be the most important, and that's going to be the vertical forgiveness. And that represents in this green line between us and God. We have committed a sin. We realize that. We go to God in prayer, asking for forgiveness, and God forgives us. That's the downward arrow. Okay? And it's over. It's done. God forgives us. And we'll look at this more next week. But that's the reason that Jesus died on the cross, was for that vertical forgiveness. The second and third ways of forgiveness are the horizontal. That's between us. That's between each other. That's between us and family, people we work with, people that we come into contact with. Okay? And that's the vertical forgiveness that we deal with. And I copied this picture off the internet, and then I adjusted it yesterday, and I took the center of the horizontal line out. Because with the vertical, it's guaranteed, isn't it? But with the horizontal, it's not necessarily guaranteed. Just because we ask for somebody's forgiveness doesn't mean they're going to give it back. Okay? Or somebody asks us, we might have a problem in doing it and giving forgiveness. And so I took that line out and said it could be one way. And there's nothing that we can do about that. If we wrong somebody and they're not a Christian and we ask for forgiveness, they won't do it. There's nothing else you can do about it. But then I got to thinking about it, and hopefully you can see it, I added a little line between the two, because especially with us as Christians, we need to have that two-way. I ask for forgiveness for something that I've done, and you give me the forgiveness back. You forgive me. Okay? So there is that double way, that double direction with the horizontal between us and somebody else. And that's what that represents and why I broke it up the way I did. Today, I tried to break this down, the scriptures and all, into 4 parts. And the way I did that, I got to looking at it, it's like, we need to look at what forgiveness is. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Next week, we're going to look at the vertical. Okay? We're going to look at us and God and that forgiveness line. And then the weekend, or the next week, the 21st, we'll look at the idea of us asking for forgiveness from others. And then on the 28th, we'll look at people asking us for forgiveness. And we'll look at how that needs to act, how that needs to work out, and the scriptures that deal with that. There's a lot of scriptures in here on the sheet in the Old Testament and Psalms and all. I may or may not pick those up, and I might throw in some extras like I usually do because they don't cover all the scriptures dealing with that. But I encourage you to read these scriptures on the sheet. If you want to break them up per the day, that's fine. However you want to read them, I encourage you to do that. So let's go on. And the scripture that I'm going to use kind of as our baseline for this month is found in Colossians 3, verses 12 through 13. Paul, in his letter to the Christians at Colossae, is telling us how we as Christians need to live our lives, what we need to do, how we need to treat other people, how we need to treat each other. Paul also gives the foundation of what we're going to be talking about this month. In Colossians 3, verses 12 and 13, therefore, as the elect of God, he's talking to the Christians there, but he's also talking to us because we are the elect of God, holy and beloved. Put on tender mercies. Okay, so he's telling us as the elect of God, as Christians, how we need to live. Put on tender mercies, kindness, humility, meekness, long-suffering. Now, when you look at today, when you look at society, when you look at the people around us, do we see these traits a lot? Do we see tender mercies? Do we see kindness, humility, meekness, and long-suffering? You might see that in some people, especially older people, but a lot of people, you don't find these traits. But Paul is telling us that these are traits that we need to have, not just with each other, but with everybody, because we are a Christian. Okay? He goes on in verse 13, bearing with one another. We need to bear with one another. We need to get along with each other. And Paul says, as best as possible for you. There might be somebody you just can't get along with, but you need to the best that you can. And forgiving one another. Okay? There's the basis for this month. We need to forgive one another. If anyone has a complaint against you, okay, so you've done something wrong, somebody has a complaint against you, how are you going to do? What are you going to do? Even as Christ forgave you, there's that vertical forgiveness, okay? Christ has forgiven you, so you must also do. We must forgive one another. Again, that is a horizontal forgiveness. Just as Christ forgave us, that's the vertical, then Paul goes back to the horizontal. Forgiveness by stating that we as Christians, the elect of God, must also forgive. Okay? And I found this arrow here and I said, that's a good representation of this verse. A good representation of what we're going to be looking at this month. Talking about the horizontal and the vertical. They're tied together as we see here in this letter from Paul. That we as Christians go to God and ask for forgiveness, okay? But we also need to forgive others as Christ has forgiven us. They're tied together. Okay? You notice Paul didn't give an option. Well, if you feel okay, if you can get past it, no. We have to, as a Christian, be willing to forgive. Which brings up the next part. What is forgiveness? In order to forgive, we need to understand what it is. Okay? Forgiveness is where we forgive somebody for doing us wrong, or we ask for forgiveness for the wrong that we have done to somebody else. I looked it up on the internet, Wikipedia or dictionary or whatever it was, and I hate it when the definition of the word is the word. Forgiveness is asking to be forgiven, or asking for. I was like, that doesn't give you what forgiveness is. That's just telling you the same word over and over again. Okay, but forgiveness is the action or the process of forgiving or being forgiven. Okay, forgiveness involves willfully putting aside feelings of resentment towards someone who has committed a wrong, been unfair or hurtful or otherwise harmed you in some way. And I guarantee that every single one of us have fit into that category. And we have been wronged by somebody else, and I'm sure the same applies, that we have wronged other people. Because we're human. We make mistakes. And that's what this is about. Forgiveness is not merely accepting what happened or ceasing to be angry. You've heard the old saying that time heals all wounds. That is not forgiveness. That is just a hard, crusty scab over the situation. Okay? Yeah, I know that didn't sound too good, did it? Okay? But time does not heal the problem that exists between, and I'm just going to say between you and somebody else. Hoping that, time will heal all wounds. That if I just let this go and forget about it, don't bring it up and don't say anything, it'll go away. And it might for you, but it might not for the other person. And that problem, that hurt, still exists. Rather, forgiveness involves a voluntary transformation of feelings, your attitudes, and your behavior, so that you are no longer dominated by resentment and can express compassion, generosity, or the like toward the person who wronged you or who you wronged. Forgiveness is release of resentment and anger. Okay? And it might not have started off that way, but because you were trying to let time heal and, maybe forget about it, it's turned into that. Okay? So that's what forgiveness is. Now, what forgiveness is not. And I looked up on the internet trying to find out some different things, and this is the only one. This came from a website, Hope for the Heart. And they listed 10 things that forgiveness is not, but they also list 10 things of what forgiveness is, the truths about forgiveness. And so I want to look down through these 10 things and talk about them. My throat is still scratchy from Wednesday, the surgery on Wednesday. I forgot. Sorry about that. This list of what forgiveness is and is not referring to is the horizontal forgiveness. These do not apply per se to the vertical between us and God. Okay? That's a different forgiveness. Again, that's pretty much guaranteed, isn't it? If we ask God for forgiveness and we're truthful about it, we're honest about it, God's going to forgive us. This has to deal with the horizontal when we're dealing with people, when we're dealing with feelings, when we're dealing with emotions, when we're dealing with, whatever it is. So that's what we're going to be talking about. Forgiveness is not forgetting. We go to God in prayer and ask God for forgiveness for our sin, and it is done and forgotten on His part. We, on the other hand, should remember it so that we don't commit that sin again. Okay? We can't, I sinned, I pray for forgiveness, I need to forget. No, you need to remember it so that you don't recommit that sin. That whole forget your history and if you forget your history, you don't read about your history, you're bound to redo your history again. It's true. If we forget about our history personally, we're bound to repeat and be our bad self again. Okay, so let's remember those things as we go through these truths and faults. Number one, forgiveness, we just talked about it, is not forgetting. Okay? You can't just hope that, the person involved will forget about it. I'm going to forget about it. Give me about 10 years, I'll forget about it. Give me tomorrow, I might forget about it. Okay? But that's not what forgiveness is. It's not forgetting. It's about getting it in the open and asking for forgiveness or accepting forgiveness and moving on. It is necessary to remember before you can forgive. If by chance you didn't do anything about it and it's been 5 years down the road and you forgot about it, did you take care of that problem? No, you did not. You just forgot about it, which is what you were hoping for. Okay? So forgetting about it is not forgiveness. Number two, forgiveness is not denying the hurt. Have you ever hurt yourself and say, well, I didn't hurt myself. I won't look at it. It doesn't hurt. You can't deny it because everything you do, you're going to bump into it. You're going to hurt. It's bleeding. You feel it. Okay? You stumped your toe. You're going to remember it because you're going to stump it again. Okay? So forgiveness is not denying that hurt that was caused by whatever occurred between you and somebody else. It is feeling the hurt and releasing it to God. I don't know who came up with it, but let go and let God. It's very true. We need to let go and let God. We don't need to hold on to it or deny that hurt that happened. Number three, forgiveness is not the same as reconciliation. Okay? Remember those of us who have had checking accounts, reconciliation, you reconciled your account at the end of the month, your bank sent you a statement and you took that ending balance and you took your checkbook and you flipped it over and you went on the back of it and you wrote that ending balance, and then you added all your deposits and you took away all the checks that you've written and you came up with a number, and hopefully that number matches your checkbook, and so you've reconciled the two. You know how much money you don't have. Okay? It takes two to reconcile. It took your bank account and it took your checkbook. It takes two to reconcile, but it only takes one to forgive. Okay? It takes two to reconcile the situation, the problem that we have. Okay? The person that you've wronged or the person that has wronged you. But again, as we stated at the beginning with that horizontal line with a gap in the middle, I can ask for forgiveness for something that I've done, but that doesn't mean you have to forgive me. That's up to you. I've done my part. I've asked for forgiveness. I can't force you to forgive me, can I? You can't force that person to forgive you. That's up to them. And that's what this is saying here. It takes two to reconcile the problem. It takes two to reconcile the issue. It takes two. As long as you do your part, that's all you can do. Okay? And it's hard sometimes for us to understand and hard sometimes for us to deal with, because I did my part. How come you're not doing your part? You can't force them to, because they've got to work through the hurt as well. Number 4, forgiveness is not circumventing God's justice. I have a problem with this one. And it might be just the way I'm cycling it through my head. But forgiveness is not circumventing God's justice. It is allowing God to execute His justice in His time and in His way. The way my brain went to it, I'm thinking, okay, I'm a Christian, somebody's wronged me, they don't want to do anything about it. God's sharpening up His lightning bolt, and He's going to strike them down because, they didn't. No, that's how I see this as being. Okay? That it is not allowing God to execute His justice in His time and His way. Now, I do agree with, people are going to have to answer for the things that they do. at whatever time in their life, whatever, whether it's they die early or, the end of time or whatever, like we've talked about, yes, God is going to execute his judgment, and he's going to execute his will, as we've all studied, we all understand, and we all know. But to me, the way this is written is, okay, they didn't forgive, you asked for forgiveness, they didn't forgive you, you're Christian, God's going to, exert judgment against them. That's how I see it. It might not be that way. Number 5, forgiveness is not excusing wrong behavior. It is acknowledging that the behavior was wrong and shouldn't happen again. Okay? Just because you forgave somebody for stealing your car doesn't make it right, does it? Okay? I know somebody who had a family member killed, and you see it in court to where they'll forgive that individual for killing their husband, their son, their daughter, or whatever, but that doesn't make that killing right, and that doesn't mean that, okay, the family forgives them, okay, you're free to go on. No, he still has to face what happened. He still has to face the judgment of his actions. And again, that's one of those cases to where you forgive the individual, but the individual might say, whatever, I'll kill again if you release me. Again, you're not going to get the forgiveness from that person, but you forgave them. That's your part of it. Okay? So again, forgiveness does not excuse wrong behavior. Number 6, forgiveness is not waiting for time to heal all wounds. It is clear that time doesn't always heal wounds. Some people will not allow healing. Okay? So, you might need to wait a little bit of time from your wrong to talk to that person and try to get things worked out. But again, just waiting, if I wait 10 years, maybe this will blow over. You can't do that. Okay? You can't wait for time to heal all wounds, because that's not a true statement, is it? Because it affected you more than it did them, and you need to hear that forgiveness. So we can't allow that to happen. Number 7, forgiveness is not letting the guilty off the hook. And we just talked about this. It is moving the guilty from your hook to God's hook. Okay? Nothing you could do about it, but God can, and God will. Again, we need to let go and let God. Number 8, forgiveness is not explaining away the hurt. It is working through the hurt. And we have a tendency of doing that, don't we? When we hurt somebody, we try to lessen it on us and explain away, well, this is what happened. This is what was going on in my life. This is what I was feeling. I needed you to steal your car. Okay? But no, we can't explain away the hurt by forgiveness. Because that hurt will still be there. Number 9, forgiveness is not suffering or not stuffing your anger. You can't take your anger and take your duffel bag and just put it in there and shove it down and pack it down, and that's not going to get rid of it, is it? No. It's going to be like the Jack in the Box, boing, it's all going to come back out at some point. Okay? You can't stuff it away. It is resolving your anger by releasing the offense to God. Again, let go and let God. And sometimes we have problems with that, don't we? I'm in control. I do everything in my life. I control everything that happens in my life. And I can't do that if I let God. I've got to be able to control it, and I can't handle the situation, so I'm just going to... No, we can't stuff it. We can't get rid of it. We have to deal with it. Okay? And sometimes if you can't get that back and forth situation of forgiveness, then we need to let go of it and let God deal with it. And number 10, forgiveness is not a feeling. It is a choice, an act of the will. Okay? I just feel like forgiving you, because I'm a Christian, I'm supposed to. No, you need to be willing to actually forgive the person, not just say the words to, because I have to. You have to mean what you say. All right, those were the 10 that I found on that. I looked around and I found another section. We're just going to go through these kind of briefly. Some of them are different. Some of them kind of intermingle. And you'll see that as we go through these. And again, this is what forgiveness is not. Forgiveness, according to the Bible, is not approving of or diminishing a sin that was committed. Okay? We don't have that authority to say, well, you sin, that's okay. No, that's up between them and God. Okay? But again, it happened. We need to admit it. We need to work through it, and not do it again. Forgiveness is not, again, enabling sin. We can't allow this to continue on. People will do that a lot of times with, let's say, they have a family member who is on drugs. And it's okay. We'll help you get through it. We'll work around and do whatever. They're just enabling the person to continue on with their sin problem, continue on with the issue, continue on, bringing down the family, putting the family in danger and everything. Just because, we'll forgive you, we'll enable it. That's not what forgiveness is. Forgiveness is not denying a wrongdoing. You've been wronged or you've wronged somebody else. And you can't say, I forgive you or whatever, just to wash it away and sweep it under the carpet. Forgiveness is not waiting for an apology. Because depending on what was happened between you and this other person, you might not get that apology. Even though you said, I'm sorry, I've wronged you, I've done this, it might have hurt them in such a way that they might not be able to. Now, the other side of that is, as a Christian, we have to. Okay? We have to work through this. As Paul was saying, we've got to love each other, we've got to endure with each other, we've got to forgive each other. That means we've got to work through those hard issues, those hard problems. And we need to work on forgiveness. But again, those outside of the church, you might not get it. And that's where that horizontal might just be one way. And again, forgiveness is not forgetting, because sometimes we just can't forget it. It's there. It's a part of our life. But we do everything we can to forget it once we've gone through the forgiveness phase. Forgiveness is not ceasing to feel pain. We discussed that one as well. Depending on what it was, that pain might still exist. Forgiveness is not a one-time event. Okay? It is not a one-time event. Some of you might hear the saying that, hurt, it still hurts, doesn't mean that you failed to forgive. You might have forgiven the individual, but that pain of what happened is still there. Forgiveness is not a one-time event. You can't, okay, I forgave you and it's over with, it's done. Something else might happen, and you have to forgive the person again. And maybe again. Okay? And that's part of being a Christian. And again, forgiveness is not, number 8, is not neglecting justice. If it's broken a law, then justice needs to take place. So we can't think that, okay, I forgive you and just wash it under the rug. Forgiveness is not trusting. Okay? Depending on what this individual has done to you or you have done to somebody else, you might not trust that individual anymore. One of the things that was stating here was, babysitting and they hurt your child. That doesn't mean you forgive them. That doesn't mean you have to trust them again to babysit, because they might hurt your child again and you don't want to take that chance. So just because you forgive doesn't mean you can trust that person again. Forgiveness, and again, is not reconciliation. It takes two to reconcile and to make things straight. But the thing about forgiveness when done right, when done complete, forgiveness can heal. Forgiveness can help to heal the wounds that existed because of what occurred between you and somebody else. Forgiveness helps to heal. I want to end this morning in Ephesians 4, verses 25 to 32. Again, Paul, in his letter to the Ephesians, kind of brings this together of what we're talking about. And again, he goes on telling us how, as Christians, how we should live. Therefore, putting away lying. Okay, and that could be one of the things that occurred that you got to forgive about. Let each one of you speak truth with his neighbor. For we are members of one another. Be angry. It's okay to be angry, but do not sin. Do not the sun go down on your wrath, nor give place to the devil. Because if you let that anger go on, and it festers, devil's going to work his way in there, okay? And then you'll end up sinning. Don't give way to the devil. Verse 28, let him who stole steal no longer, but rather let him labor, working with his hands what is good, that he may have something to give him who has need. Verse 29, let no corrupt word proceed out of your mouth, but what is good for necessary edification, that it may impart grace to the hearers. Okay? If you're cursing, if you're saying bad things, if you're, backbiting somebody else and saying things behind their back, and somebody knows you're a Christian, are you edifying God with those words? No, you're not. If you're lying, you're not edifying God. So make sure that everything that proceeds out of your mouth edifies God. Verse 30. And do not grieve the Holy Spirit of God, by whom you were sealed for the day of redemption. Let all bitterness, wrath, anger, clamor, and evil speaking be put away from you with all malice. Okay? So we shouldn't have any bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and speak evil. It's kind of hard to do that if we're forgiving people, isn't it? But if we're not forgiving people, those things are going to come up. So again, forgiveness is important. Verse 32, and be kind to one another, tender-hearted, and here it is, forgiving one another, horizontal, even as God in Christ forgave you. And there's the vertical again. And I should have put that four-way arrow here. Okay? Because God forgave us through Christ, then we need to forgive those around us. I found these two pictures and I put them together, and it's just showing that not forgiving, it puts us in chains, it puts us in bonds. But by forgiving others, we're free of those bonds. I like the one on the right where they're showing the birds flying away. Not forgiving somebody can put us in chains and bind us forever. But by facing the fact, by facing the individual, talking it out, discussing it, we can be free of those bonds that are binding us. If there's any way that we can help you this morning, let us know. If you are a Christian and you need forgiveness, God is there for that. All we have to do is go to God in prayer and get forgiveness. Maybe you need forgiveness from your brothers and sisters for things you have said and things you have done. That's what you need to take care of. Maybe you haven't put on Christ in baptism, and that's something that you realize that you need in your life, that you need to be a Christian and get a home in heaven. We could take care of that sin problem as well this morning. Please let your wishes be known as together we stand and sing.